Hello, third graders. Welcome to day 2 of lesson 12. We're going to be using pages 126 and 127 today. We'll be learning how to model problems using multiplication. The directions say to read the problem below, then explore different ways to model two-step word problems when one operation is multiplication. So we're going to continue to talk about two-step word problems, and we're going to work on modeling those problems if one of the operations is multiplication. Remember, please, that there are 4 operations in math. There is addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. If we look at today's problem, it says that Anya bought 5 baskets of apples. Each basket had 8 apples. She used 19 apples to make applesauce. How many apples are left? Picture it. You can use a drawing to show and solve two-step word problems. We know that Anya had 5 baskets and that each basket had 8 apples. When we have equal groups, then we are able to do multiplication. You can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 baskets have been drawn, and inside each basket is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 apples. They go on to show that she used 19 apples to make applesauce. They show that she used them by crossing them out. If I'm using something or getting rid of it, I know that I'm going to subtract. So there are 8 apples in the first basket, then 8 more apples out of the second basket would give us 16, and then we would only need 3 more in the third basket to give us a total of 19 apples used. Not only can you draw a picture, but you can also make a model or a diagram to help you solve a two-step word problem. Here we can see that they have drawn 5 groups of 8. Remember that 5 groups of 8 means 5 times 8, and that's going to give us a product of 40. So she has 40 total apples that she begins with. Then in the second part of this model, you can see that she used 19 of them, and they want to know how many apples are still left, and they've represented that with a question mark. Once I find out how many apples are left, and I add it to the number of apples that she used, I should get a total of 40. And that's what these bars represent. If we take these 2 pieces and we put them back together, we could check our answer. Here, they've used a question mark to represent our unknown. An unknown is something that you don't know. You can also use letters to represent unknowns. I know many of you have seen where blanks have been used. For example, 6 times blank equals 42. That's how we're used to seeing problems. But as you develop in your math life, you're going to begin to see letters take the place of these blanks. However, their meaning is the same. I could use a letter, 6 times G equals 42. And all this means is 6 times what number would give me 42? Well, I know that 6 times 7 equals 42, so G must be equal to 7. Let's look on page 127. Now we're going to model and solve the problem from the previous page by writing equations with unknowns. So we're going to continue to work with our same problem about Anya and her baskets of her baskets of apples, and how many she used to make applesauce and how many are left. Number 2 says, how do you find the total number of apples that Anya bought? We know that Anya bought 5 baskets, and in each basket, there were 8 apples. If I'm discussing equal groups and I'm putting them together, I know that I'm going to multiply. So I have to multiply the number of baskets, that's the number symbol, times the apples per basket. Sorry, my pen is not cooperating. So I would determine my total number of apples by using multiplication to multiply the number of baskets times the apples per basket. The second part of number 2 says, let A be the total number of apples that Anya bought. Write an equation to show how to find A. If I look back at number 2, I've written that we're going to multiply the number of baskets, which is 5. Let me fix that 5, that's really bad. Times the number of apples per basket, which is 8. This is going to give me a product of A because we are using A to represent the total number of apples that Anya bought. Number 3 says, let L be the number of apples that are left after Anya makes applesauce. If you start with A, how will you find L? Write an equation to show how to find L. Pause the video for just a minute and discuss with someone who is there with you, or think for yourself, how would I find L? What equation would I write to determine L? Okay, you should have had some time to think about that or to discuss it with someone. We're trying to determine how we would find L. Remember that L is the number of apples that we are left with. If we start with A, which is our total number of apples that we got from multiplying 5 times 8, and we get rid of or subtract the 19 apples that were used to make applesauce, that will leave us with L. And remember, L is the number of apples that we have left after we've made applesauce. Let's move on to number 4. Number 4 asks me, how can I find the value of A, and what is the value of A? If I look back at question number 2, I can see that I find the value of A by multiplying. So I can multiply to find the value of A. The next part of the question asks me, what is the value of A? So let's look at the second part of number 2. We see that if we multiply 5 times 8, we will get the number that A represents. 5 times 8 is 40. Number 5 says, look at the equation you wrote in problem 3. Write the equation using the value of A instead of the letter. How many apples are left? So I know that the value of A is 40. And I'm subtracting the number of apples that I've used, which is 19, and that is going to give me L. 40 minus 19 is 21. So L equals 21. Remember, I said that I can always go back and check my answer. This is not something that you have to do, but it's always a good idea to do it. I would do that by adding 21 plus the number of apples used, and I should get an answer of 40. 9 plus 1 is 10. 1 plus 1 is 2, and 2 plus 2 is 4. So I know that my answer is correct because if I put it back together, I end up with 40 apples, which is what I began with. Number 6 says, explain how you can use equations to model and solve two-step word problems. Pause the video here and discuss with whomever is there with you or think about it yourself. How could you explain how to use equations to model and solve two-step word problems? So you've had a few minutes, or you could have taken a few minutes to discuss this. And what you should have talked about is how you can look for answers that describe using the information given in the problem to write equations that show how the unknowns are related to each other. So you could have written anything similar to that, and that would have been fine. What you're mostly focusing on is how you can use unknowns and how they relate to one another to solve word problems. The next part says, try it. Use what you've just learned about modeling problems using equations to solve these problems. Show your work on a separate sheet of paper. So if you don't have room right here to do your work, then you can always do it on a separate sheet of paper. Number 7 says, Josh had 4 $5 bills. Then his grandfather gave him one $10 bill. How much money does Josh have now? Pause the video here and take just a minute to solve this problem. Remember, when you're writing your equations, try to use some unknowns at first. Okay, so when I solved this problem, I used H to represent how much money Josh had. To determine how much money Josh had, I would take my 4 $5 bills, which means I have 4 groups of 5, so I would multiply 4 times 5. H equals 4 times 5. Then his grandfather is going to give him one $10 bill. So I'm going to take how much he had, and I'm going to add that $10, and it's going to give me my new total, or how much money he had now, and I'll represent that using an N. Now I'm ready to solve this problem. So let's start with the first part. If I do 4 times 5, that's going to give me my value of H. So H is going to equal 20. So he started off, he had $20. H would also be 20 over here. Then if I take $20 and I add to it the $10 that Josh got from his grandfather, I will get my new total, or what I have now. So 20 plus 10 is going to give me 30. So N, how much he has now, equals $30. I could write up here, N equals 30, because that's how much Josh has now. If you want to go back and put the dollar signs, you can. As long as you have the dollar signs on the answers, then that is perfectly acceptable. All right, let's look at number 8. Vegetable plants are sold in packs of 4. A container holds 2 packs of plants. There are 8 containers on one shelf. How many plants are on the shelf? Pause the video here and go ahead and write out your problem. Remember to try to use some letters as your unknowns. All right, let's work on problem number 8. It says that vegetable plants are sold in packs of 4. So I have 4 packs, and that a container holds 2 packs of plants. So if I multiply 4 times 2, that's going to give me my number of plants. Then it says there are 8 containers on one shelf. How many plants are on that shelf? So if I want to find out how many total vegetable plants there are on that shelf, I would have to do P, which is the number of plants, times 8, which is the number of containers on one shelf, and that's going to give me V, the total number of vegetable plants on the shelf. Let's go back over here first and solve for P. 4 is the number of packs. 2 is the number that a container holds. It can hold 2 packs. So 4 times 2 is going to give me 8. So P equals 8. Over here, P is also going to equal 8 because we're still talking about the number of plants that that container will hold. If I multiply 8 times 8, I will get an answer for how many vegetable plants are on one shelf. So if I multiply 8 times 8, I get 64. So V equals 64. So there are 64 plants on the shelf. Please join me tomorrow for day 3 of lesson 12. Have a great rest of your day.